Mishnah 14, which is discussing a number of items, four in particular, that essentially are things that could be good, but if you do it in the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong amount, it becomes destructive. So yesterday we spoke about sleep, too much sleep, or sleeping late in a way where you're going to miss out on things that you should be doing. And we talked about drinking wine, mainly in the middle of the day, and certainly overdoing it. The two for today, the last two, put on the board here, put the Mishnah back. I've got to find that Mishnah. Hang on a second. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, just going to share it. And yeah, so the Mishnah is, remember, it was Rabbi Dosa. Ben Hyrcanus was the author of this Mishnah. And in addition to Sheno Shel Shachar, sleep of the morning, sleeping late, and wine in the afternoon, wine in the middle of the day, he says, V'sichas hayeladim, chatter of children. We'll have to discuss what that means. V'yeshivas botei chnesio shel amei haaretz, and sitting in the gatherings of ignorant people. Those things, motziin es adam min ha'olam. Those things are what take a person out of the world. So those are the things that we are going to talk to. You have these two items, children's talk. Now, what is children's talk? So there's different ways to understand it. One is take it literally. It's talking about your children are talking. Another is that it's an example. It's the type of talk which is childish, which is childlike. So it could be talking about adults. So we'll start with the idea that it's actually children's chatter. If it's children's talk, what's the problem with children's talk? So a little bit too much of it. If a parent spends, when a parent gets involved with their children, how are they spending their time with their children? So the Bartanura points out that it can actually cause your parents to not be doing important things. In particular, you talk about learning Torah. But another aspect of it is that what could happen is that, as Rabbeinu Yonah points out, is that people who are, most of us, we like kids, right? But it could end up that we're spending too much time. You get so involved in the kids that you're spending all your time with the kids, and you're not really, you're not doing anything else. So in a sense, one angle is that it's going to hamper your growth. But another aspect it could be also that you can also hurt the children, overdoing it. There are parents who are not necessarily overprotective, which is what was the one issue, but also overly involved, right? You have to let children do their thing. If a parent gets too involved in everything that their kid is doing, then it's overbearing and could also end up hampering the child's growth. So, children also need a certain amount of freedom of expression, freedom to do things on their own, as opposed to the parent being involved in it. And, as a parent, a little bit off to the side here, as a parent, your job is to be a parent, not to be your kid's friend, right? There's different roles, So that's another angle, is that too much involvement by a parent into the kids could also affect both yourself in terms of your accomplishments, but also your children. Another way to look at it, though, was that it's not talking about children. It's talking about childish behavior, childish chatter. That when a person is an adult, you're the type of talk you should be doing should be a little more serious. Even when you're having fun, there's a way to have fun, not in a baby-like manner, not in a immature manner, right? So that's also, and he also points out that a parent has an obligation to supervise your children's speech, to make sure that they're speaking properly, that the things that they're saying are appropriate, both in terms of the use of language, the topics they talk about, who they talk about, lashon hara, etc. Right? All of that is also an obligation on the parents. So again, the children's speech, if you are not watching what they're doing, then that could also lead to problems. Rashi actually looks at it a little different. Also, he says it's referring to, he calls it young kids, young boys who are engaged in what he calls letzonos. Letzonos is kind of like behavior which is like making fun of things or totally without meaning. It's just not just it's more than immature, but it's kind of scoffing, making fun of. And a lot of people enjoy that type of behavior. We see the world gets in on that. And what happens though is that adults will also follow in that. When they see that happening, they say, "Oh, this is fun. We'll also do this kind of thing." And again, it brings people to doing wrong behavior. And finally, on the topic of children's talk, the Tiferes Yisrael looks at it as and he looks at this every one of the examples, every one in the Mishnah as an example, not as a take it literally, but more of a metaphor or example. And he says it's referring to humor or ridicule. That and again, his approach to this Mishnah is that everything's good in moderation. All of these things are things you need and are important, but when you overdo it, it takes you out. So, you know what? Having fun is also important. Even some idle talk. You need a little bit of that. You need to relieve some pressure if you've been working hard, right? We say give your brain a rest, right? So there is a concept of that you've been working hard and using your brain for all kinds of difficult things, whether it be in learning, whether it be at work, all right, etc. And now you kind of got to need you just to be a little bit to dumb it down, right? There is a concept of that, but there's a limitation to that. You can't overdo it. So. And also he says who you do it with and how you do it. He says you should doing it with like with people who are being childish. That's not that's not actually productive at all. Even for giving your brain a rest. Sit with other adults who have there's some intelligence. There is when people who are sages when they make jokes. There's meaning to the jokes too, right? There's something to it. We can learn from how they use their downtime. And he actually says that having downtime is also it's good for the soul. The soul needs a little bit of that too. However, he says the type of children's humor, that's something which is more like silly, ridiculing, that doesn't have a redeeming value, and that's not going to be, it's not good for your soul. So again, as with everything else, moderation, you need a certain amount. The last part of the Mishnah talks about the gatherings of ignorant people. And again, the idea there is not, it means when the conversation is meaningless. When we've all been in conversations that are meaningless, right? Where we're talking about something that has absolutely no redeeming value. And basically that kind of conversation is really a total waste of time. And there are many things that we could do with our downtime to have a slightly more meaningful conversation that still will be not intense and not necessarily like we're learning or anything like that. We're not working, but it's still going to be productive. And therefore, he says, again, it's important to have an outlet. Everybody needs an outlet of, having some, we'll call it idle chatter. But it's only when you're having a discussion with other people who are respect for people who are who have values, then your conversation with them is going to have some value. But if you're having conversations with people who don't have any values and don't care about anything, what's going to happen is you'll end up having lashon hara in the conversation. People who use foul language, right? Those conversations don't have redeeming value, and therefore, again, who you're hanging out with in your downtime does make a difference in terms of even for restful type of talk, there's going to make a difference. Here, the wording in the Mishnah was actually a Beit Knesset, but it doesn't mean a shul. It means any type of place where people gather. And Rabbi points out it can even mean like a theater or something. And then he says, and Trusky says something similar that entertainment, the concept of entertainment is really to escape reality. What people want to do is they want to escape reality. And it's questionable how much value it has to escape reality. Rabbi Trusky talks about what he calls escapism. He says that people with a lot of activities that people engage in to escape from the reality of the world they're living in. And he said that Rabbi Trusky, if you recall, he was a psychologist and dealt with people with addictions. So he uses that as examples. Addictive behaviors, right? Addictive behaviors are people who are trying to escape their reality. But he said it could also include all of these. You could be sleeping in order to avoid having to deal with other things. You could be drinking because you're trying to, you had a rough day and you want to escape, you want to get at, you want to avoid it, or maybe other, if you're drinking continuously, if you know someone who has that problem, then for sure. But even a lot of times, a drink is not just for the enjoyment of the drink. A lot of times, a drink is because you need to you want to get drunk, or you want to just get away from whatever problem you have. And all of these things are things that are merely taking you away from the real world, and that's not a positive. And in the real world, we're able to achieve things. In the escaping world, we're not achieving anything, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to stay in the real world and not let all of these other types of activities take us out of the world where we are able to achieve things, and to limit the amount that we're able to achieve. And we'll hold it there for today. Have a great day, everyone.